My mother-in-law said, I cooked mushroom soup. It's good for the heart. You should eat it before it gets cold. Her gentle tone surprised me, and I thought to myself, maybe she was trying to calm the situation between us. I ate a few spoonfuls of soup to make her happy, but then the dizziness and burning pain hit me and I collapsed. In my daze, I saw my husband's panicked face calling me hello everyone. Before we start today's story, I have a small request. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video on our channel. Your support means a lot to us. Where are you watching from? Leave your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to the story. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled my nose as I drifted in and out of consciousness. The ceiling lights above me blurred into white circles and everything felt distant, muffled, unreal. My fingers were trembling, clutching the warmth of a familiar hand, David's. I could barely move my lips, but I felt his grip tighten, his voice trembling near my ear. Stay with me, Sophie. Please, stay with me. Somewhere nearby, I heard hurried footsteps, the metallic clatter of instruments. The doctor's voice cut through the haze. What did she eat? David's voice cracked. She had dinner at home. My mother made soup, mushroom soup. There was a pause, heavy and loaded. Then came the doctor's firm, clinical tone. That soup nearly killed her. It contained toxic wild mushrooms. Even in my half-conscious state, I could sense the tension thickening in the room. David's hand slipped away from mine for just a second, and I caught faint murmurs, the kind that carried more venom than volume. Mrs. Green's voice, cold and detached. It was just homemade soup. She probably ate too much. I wanted to open my eyes, to say something to defend myself, but my body wouldn't respond. My pulse raced, the beeping monitor beside me echoing every fear, every betrayal. The doctor spoke again, this time more sharply. No, ma'am. These were not edible mushrooms. She's lucky she was brought here in time. David's voice now trembling with anger. You said they were from your garden. Mrs. Green hesitated, her words brittle. Yes, from the field behind the fence. I've picked them before. The doctor's tone grew colder. That area is known for toxic species. No one with experience would mistake them for edible mushrooms. There was silence. Only the rhythmic sound of the monitor filled the space. In that silence, I felt it, the truth I couldn't yet say aloud. This wasn't an accident. And as my world faded into darkness again, I heard David's voice, soft, desperate, whispering my name over and over. Before the hospital, before the sirens and the poison, everything seemed normal. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I had been married to David for just 6 months. We were still in that tender stage where every morning felt like a fresh promise. Coffee together before work, laughter over burnt toast, whispered plans about buying our first home. David worked as a financial analyst, calm and methodical, the kind of man who believed everything could be solved if you just stayed reasonable. And then there was Mrs. Green, his mother. She had been a widow for over a decade, living alone in the house David grew up in. When our lease ended and we decided to stay with her for a few months to save for a down payment, she greeted us at the door with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. At first, I tried to please her. I cooked dinner, helped with the laundry, cleaned the kitchen twice a day, but nothing I did was ever enough. She can't even cook properly, she would mutter when David wasn't around. Or worse, when he was, you spoil her too much, David. She'll never learn to be a wife. I used to laugh it off, tell myself she just needed time to get used to me. But it wasn't about time. It was about control. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets so I wouldn't break the dishes. She rewashed the laundry I'd already done, saying it smelled like chemicals. Once, she even hid the grocery receipts and told David I'd forgotten to pay the bills. Whenever something went wrong, a broken mug, a missing envelope, a burnt meal, somehow, it was always my fault. David loved his mother, and he believed her criticisms were harmless. She just wants to help, he'd say, wrapping an arm around me. She's not used to having someone else in the house, but I could feel it, that invisible tension that grew stronger every day. The way her smile stiffened whenever David kissed my cheek. The way her tone sharpened whenever I spoke too long at the dinner table. I tried to ignore it, tried to be the patient daughter-in-law everyone expected me to be. But deep down, I knew. This house wasn't a home. It was a battlefield, and sooner or later, something or someone was going to break. That afternoon, the house was unnervingly quiet. The kind of quiet that made every sound, every step, every spoon against porcelain feel louder than it should. Mrs. Green was humming softly in the kitchen when I came downstairs. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of herbs and something earthy. She looked up as I entered, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Oh, Sophie," she said, voice oddly gentle. "I made mushroom soup myself this morning. It's good for the heart. You should have some before it gets cold. I blinked, a little surprised by her tone. Usually, dinner came with lectures or cold remarks, not smiles. Thank you, I said carefully. It smells different, she chuckled, ladling the soup into a bowl. These are fresh mushrooms from my garden. Organic, of course. Nature's gift, you could say? I hesitated. From your garden? I didn't know you grew mushrooms. They've always been there, she said, waving a hand as if it were nothing. People just don't notice what's right under their noses. Her words were odd, but I brushed the thought away. The soup looked rich, creamy, dotted with herbs. I told myself she was trying to make peace, maybe soften things between us. Still, I glanced toward the door. Maybe we should wait for David. He'll be home soon. Mrs. Green's smile faltered just slightly. You don't need to wait. In this house, we respect our elders. You eat what's offered. The firmness in her voice left no room for discussion. I sat down quietly, picking up the spoon. My stomach felt tense, though I couldn't say why. I tasted it. Warm, savory, but with a faintly bitter edge I couldn't place. It's good, I said, forcing a polite smile. Her eyes stayed on me as I took another sip, as if she was waiting for something. The silence between us stretched uncomfortably long. I pushed the bowl slightly away. Maybe I'll save the rest for David, I murmured. He should try it too. Mrs. Green tilted her head, expression unreadable. Suit yourself. I stood to put the bowl in the kitchen, but the room suddenly shifted, like the walls had moved a little closer. My vision blurred at the edges and a heavy nausea rose in my chest. Mrs. Green? The words dissolved as the floor tilted beneath me. My fingers slipped on the counter and the world went dark before I hit the ground. When I opened my eyes again, everything was flashing red and white. My body was shaking uncontrollably, my throat burning with acid, and distant voices were shouting my name. Sophie? Sophie, stay with me. It was David's voice, trembling, broken. I could barely see him, just the outline of his face as he carried me in his arms, rushing toward the front door. The night air hit my skin like ice before the car door slammed shut and the engine roared to life. I remember his hand gripping mine as we sped through the dark streets. My pulse was fading and the world around me narrowed to the sound of his voice, whispering over and over, "Please don't leave me. Don't you dare leave me." By the time we reached the hospital, my consciousness was slipping again. The lights were too bright. The smell of disinfectant stung my nose. Someone shouted for a stretcher. Then everything went quiet. When I woke again, the room was full of tension. So thick I could almost taste it. David stood near the bed, his shirt stained, his eyes bloodshot. Across from him, Mrs. Green sat perfectly straight in the corner chair, her hands folded neatly on her lap, expression calm, almost bored. The doctor's voice cut through the silence. This is acute poisoning. The mushrooms she ate were toxic. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. David froze. What did you just say? The doctor sighed. Toxic wild mushrooms. She's lucky she was brought in time. Another hour and he didn't finish the sentence. David turned to his mother, his voice trembling. Where did you get them? Mrs. Green blinked, her tone light. From behind the fence near the woods. They looked safe. Behind the fence? His voice rose. Everyone knows that area is full of wild fungus, most of it deadly. She scoffed. Oh, please. I've picked mushrooms before. She probably just has a weak stomach. You know how sensitive she is. The doctor exchanged a look with one of the nurses, then quietly excused himself. A few minutes later, 2 police officers entered the room. The hospital reported a possible poisoning case. One said gently, "We'll need to ask a few questions." Mrs. Green's lips tightened, her eyes darting toward me, but she said nothing. Moments later, a nurse whispered to David that a neighbor had already spoken to the police. They'd seen Mrs. Green that morning, basket in hand, plucking mushrooms from the abandoned lot by the woods, the same place everyone in the neighborhood avoided. The next day, the police returned to the hospital to take statements. I was still weak, hooked to an IV, my throat dry from days of treatment. David stayed by my side, his face pale but his eyes sharp with anger. Mrs. Green sat across the room, her purse clutched in her lap, her composure stiff and unyielding. She didn't look at me. Not once. The officer opened his notepad. Mrs. Green, can you tell us again where you got the mushrooms? She sighed as if the question were beneath her. Behind the fence near the woods. I've done it before. They looked safe. Did you know that area is restricted because of poisonous species? Her tone turned defensive. People exaggerate. I didn't mean any harm. David, standing behind her, clenched his fists. You didn't mean any harm? Sophie almost died. Mrs. Green finally looked at him, her eyes flashing. If my son hadn't married her, everything would have been fine. The room fell silent. David froze, disbelief spreading across his face. What did you just say? She spoke calmly as if explaining something obvious. You've changed since she came along. You don't visit me. You don't call. She took you away from me. Her voice cracked at the end. But it wasn't sadness I heard. It was resentment. The officer glanced uncomfortably at David, but he didn't move. Then the doctor entered, holding a report. The tests confirm the toxin, he said firmly. This particular mushroom is unmistakable. Anyone familiar with the area would know it's deadly. It cannot be confused with edible species. Mrs. Green's mouth opened, then closed again. David's voice rose, trembling with fury. You could have killed her. Mrs. Green stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. Don't you dare raise your voice to me. I did nothing wrong. This... She pointed at me, her fingers shaking. This woman poisoned you against your own mother. David's face hardened. No, Mom. You did that yourself. He stepped closer, his voice quieter now, but the tremor in it made the words hit harder. You're not my mother anymore. For a moment, she just stared, as if she hadn't heard him correctly. Then she broke. Her voice cracked into a sob. She's made you hate me. Everything was fine until she came. But David didn't respond. He turned away, his hand finding mine, holding it tightly as if to say the rest of his life would begin right here, away from her. The hospital room became my world for the next several days, a pale cocoon of white walls, soft beeping machines, and the faint scent of disinfectant. Each morning, a nurse would check my pulse. And each evening, David would be there, sitting quietly beside me, his fingers tracing gentle circles on my palm. When I finally opened my eyes fully and stayed awake long enough to speak, he exhaled with relief. You scared me, he whispered, pressing his forehead to my hand. You really scared me. My voice came out weak, barely a whisper. She really did it, didn't she? He hesitated for a long moment, then nodded once. There were no words left that could soften the truth. Within a week, I was strong enough to leave the hospital. David didn't take me back to that house. He'd already packed our things while I was recovering. Every photo, every document, every reminder of that place. We're starting over, he said simply. And I didn't argue. He found a small apartment on the other side of town, just big enough for the two of us. It wasn't perfect, but it felt safe, something I hadn't felt in months. Meanwhile, the investigation wrapped up. The police concluded that there wasn't enough evidence to pursue criminal charges. Mrs. Green claimed ignorance, and without a confession, the case ended there. But the neighborhood had already made up its mind. News spread quickly, the story of the widow who accidentally poisoned her daughter-in-law. People whispered behind her back, some even crossing the street to avoid her. Before long, everyone started calling her the Mushroom Lady. David tried not to talk about it, but I could see the heaviness in his shoulders whenever her name came up. Losing his mother, even after everything she'd done, left a mark. He would sit by the window some nights, staring into the dark, silent. I began therapy soon after. The nightmares wouldn't stop. Flashes of the kitchen, the smell of soup, the dizzying fall. My therapist said trauma lingers in the body long after the danger is gone. She was right. Every time I saw mushrooms at the grocery store, I had to look away. But little by little, I started to breathe again. Some scars don't fade, but they stop hurting when you finally choose to stop hiding them. Months passed and life began to find a quieter rhythm again. The faint hospital smell that used to linger in my memory faded, replaced by the scent of morning coffee and fresh paper from my office desk. I returned to work, back to my spreadsheets, reports, and familiar hum of the copier. Being an accountant wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, predictable, safe. And for me, that meant everything. David and I settled into our new apartment, a modest space overlooking the park. The first few weeks were strange. No heavy footsteps down the hall, no cold silence at dinner, no eyes watching my every move. It felt like stepping into sunlight after months underground, but peace didn't come instantly. There were nights I still woke up gasping, the phantom taste of something bitter on my tongue. David would pull me close and whisper, "You're safe now." Sometimes I believed him. We didn't hear from Mrs. Green again. Word from a neighbor said she stayed mostly indoors, blinds drawn, her once perfect garden overrun with weeds. The same garden where she'd once claimed her organic mushrooms grew. I didn't feel anger anymore, not exactly. Just an emptiness where outrage used to live. One evening while journaling for therapy, I wrote something that felt truer than anything else I'd said in months. I can't forgive her, but I can move on. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something owed. It's something that frees you. Not the person who hurt you, but the part of yourself still trapped in that moment. So, David and I packed our things again and moved to another city, somewhere quieter, where no one knew the story of the Mushroom Lady or the girl who almost died. We started fresh. On my last night before leaving, I stood by the window, looking out at the moonlit street, and whispered into the dark, "I survived." That's enough, and maybe it was. Because sometimes survival is its own kind of justice. If your mother-in-law once tried to poison you, what would you do? Would you seek revenge? Or would you do what I did? Walk away and never look back? Forgiveness isn't for the guilty. It's the way you take back the power they tried to steal.